This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good morning, Tuscaloosa, West Alabama, Internet world. How are you doing on this wonderful Saturday, March 30th? We're having kind of a part number 2 of our Saturday morning episodes. We had Luke Metz join us yesterday afternoon. We played it this morning, depending on when you guys consumed that. We enjoyed hearing from Luke Metz, class of 2025 Alabama football commit. We'll see how he transitions Mill Creek High School. You guys can check that out on any of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon. But we're shifting our attention right back to basketball. It's been a basketball heavy week, and the Crimson Tide is set to try to make some history, but a familiar foe stands in our way, or stands in Alabama's way. Look, before we bring in our guest, one thing I love about the media industry is getting to know people, having people go on their own paths, and then having sports bring them back together. I'm joined by Austin Hannon today. You can follow him. You do follow him at Austin Hannon _. He covers all things Clemson Tigers now. And really, Austin, you might have the most interesting perspective on this game in the entire nation. Has anyone covered 2 Elite 8 teams in the same season?
I doubt it. I would say I doubt it. And, you know, it's kind of funny as the bracket unfolds. Obviously, they release it on Selection Sunday. You see both Alabama and Clemson in that West region. You say, yeah, there's no way that's going to happen. You know, they're on the opposite sides. It has to be an Elite 8 game. There's no way. Really, on Selection Sunday, you're thinking either of those teams makes it that far, just based off how they've been playing recently. And then here we are a few weeks later. And it's March 30th, and now we got Alabama and Clemson on the hardwood for a chance at a Final Four. First time for both schools, only second time for both schools in the Elite 8. So huge basketball game. I think it's really interesting that here in 2024. I mean, just think about 5-6 years ago when these two schools played a ton in football. You would never think that they would be in this position that they are in today, but here we are. And yeah, it's really cool being an alumni. Of course, I used to cover Alabama, and now I'm here, and yeah, it's a pretty surreal moment, and it should be a great basketball game tonight.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be an intriguing basketball game. Clemson's been so hard for me to put my finger on all year long, so I really need your help here. Alabama lost to Clemson, a Tuesday night in November, first real big non-conference game. You were in their tennis match in Coleman Coliseum, but I left that game feeling, okay, that was a fluke, no big deal, and now here you are 4 months later. Clemson is still alive. Every time I see Clemson matched up, on ESPN against this team or that team, oh, they're going to lose. But they win. Oh, they're going to lose. But they win. And then again, the bracket, 6th seed. Oh, well, they'll run out against Baylor. Baylor will get them. Oh, Arizona will get them. No big deal. But they just keep winning, like ugly, winning 24-11, 11-9 on the season. 5th in the ACC, one of 3 ACC teams left in the big dance. What is it about this team that despite maybe what it looks like on paper, they continue to get good results?
Yeah, I think that was, you mentioned the ACC. I think that's been a huge talking point for head coach Brad Brownell, and really all the ACC coaches that are left, that all year you look at net rankings, you look at Ken Pom, and it's like, man, like you think of the ACC as this basketball conference, and yet they're not really getting any kind of respect from the analytics and the people that cover the sport, and people saying it's a down year for the conference, and they're only going to get 3 or 4 teams in the tournament, where the Big 12 and the SEC are just throwing teams left and right in there. And they've kind of used this tournament as a proving ground. And Clemson's one of those teams. I think they've had an interesting season. I mean, basketball is such a weird sport. And I mean, everybody knows you're going to get hot, you're going to get cold, you're going to go through stretches where maybe you look like one of the best basketball teams in your conference. You're going to go through stretches where, you lose 3 or 4 games in a row. Alabama's experienced that this year. Clemson's experienced that this year. They started 9-0. They went 11-1 in non-conference. You mentioned it. They went to Tuscaloosa. We were both, I think you were there too. They beat Alabama in Coleman Coliseum. And that was kind of, it felt like they were kind of peaking at that moment, which as a basketball team, you don't really want to be peaking in November and December. But they kind of went through that. Then they went through this really bad stretch in the early January, middle of January, with conference play kind of getting going. I think they started ACC play 4-6. And Brownell talks a lot about how he kind of had really a sit-down moment with his team at that point and said, hey, look, we did all these good things in November and December. We went to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. We've gone to Chapel Hill and beat North Carolina. But if we don't kind of capitalize on this. And if we keep playing 4 and 6 basketball, we're not going to make the tournament. And so I think that kind of got the team's attention. They then went on. They were kind of stolen a game from them at Cameron Indoor in the middle of February with some referee bad officiating at the end of a game that you can't really control that. But
you get that at sometimes.
Right. They start playing better basketball. And it's like, okay, here comes Clemson. And then to end the season, they kind of reverted back to those January ways. They lost 3 of 4 games to start March. They lost in the second round, technically the first round. It was their first game in Washington, D.C., to Boston College, who played in the NIT. So it didn't look good. They got matched up against New Mexico, who was an 11 seed that was very popular in a lot of brackets because they had just won the Mountain West tournament. And then they blow them out. And then it's like you said, they run into Baylor. And it's like, okay, this team won a national championship a couple years ago. This is where the run's going to end. Once again, Baylor can't really shoot. It's kind of been a common theme, though. And same with Arizona. And so is it luck? Is it skill? The teams that they've played, New Mexico, Baylor, and Arizona, all great offensive teams. And yet I believe the number is the 3-point shooting percentage from all 3 of those games so far has been 18% for the opponent. So is it teams missing shots or is it Clemson playing good defense? We're obviously going to get to find out a little bit more about that 3-point percentage tonight with how Alabama likes to get the shots up. So, something's got to give. Is Alabama going to be another one of those teams that they've been hot all tournament, but are they going to run into Clemson and start not shooting the ball well like we've seen other teams? So that is, obviously what happened back in November. Alabama did not play very well offensively in that game, whereas Clemson made a lot of shots. And once again, I think both coaches yesterday said, though, we're not really putting too much stake into that game. And I think somebody also asked Brownell, you've beaten Coach Oates 2 or 3 times now in your career. Is there something you're doing special that other teams aren't? And he kind of said, not that I know of. I mean, I think maybe we're probably doing the same thing everybody else is trying to do, which is defend the 3-point line. And maybe we've done it more successfully than these other SEC teams. But that result in November in Coleman Coliseum is not going to have any impact on the game tonight.
Well, let's talk about Brunell just a little bit. He's in his 14th year. Clemson misses the NCAA tournament last year after finishing 3rd in the ACC. So you talk about that sit-down meeting. He's like, oh, we're seeing our fate play out again in order to rectify that. And I'm hearing you tell the story of the season, and I'm hearing a lot of parallels to Alabama. A nice little early start, a little bit of falters here and there, and then a falter late February, early March for sure, bouncing out in the first game of the SEC tournament, and now going on a little bit of a run. Brad Brunell, correct me, we saw some 2-3 zone and 3-2 zone in that game against Tuscaloosa. What are they going to do? You talk about guarding the 3-point line. What's going to be the kind of game plan for Clemson tonight? You talk about their luck. KenPom only has them at 210, so maybe they're not lucky. Maybe they are really good, but their pace is very, very slow. So it's opposite Alabama, 257. Mm-hmm. What's going to be the key to Alabama scoring consistently in that game? Again, in November, Alabama hits 30% from beyond the arc, but Clemson at 50%. So it wasn't a horrible offense, but it wasn't really that good either. What's really the key to cracking the Clemson defense?
Yeah, it starts with Chase Hunter, who's kind of their do-it-all defender. You're going to see him on Mark Sears all night. He was guarding Mark Sears back in November as well. And it really starts there. I mean, they want to put a lot of pressure on the ball handler and kind of force Mark Sears to give it up, make Alabama do something a little different, because at times this year, Clemson's been pretty bad against the pick and roll on defense. And obviously Alabama uses the pick and roll quite a bit, running the NBA set that they do. So if they're able to do that again, I mean, there's no reason Clemson can't win this game. I mean, I was thinking about it the other night. It's not a terrible matchup with Alabama because of the things that they do well. PJ Hall is important, obviously, as he is in any Clemson basketball game. We saw him play really, really well back in Tuscaloosa, just because and at that point in the season, Alabama didn't really have a post presence. And so when PJ Hall came in there, Grant Nelson was still very much raw to the high major Division I basketball game. And so he wasn't really ready for that physicality. That's something that Clemson does a lot. They want to get up in you. They want to play physical. They want to, they're going to foul a lot. PJ Hall's fouled out of a lot of games here recently. And Alabama struggled at times against teams that like to do that. I mean, you think about Tennessee, the way they play, the way Auburn's played against Alabama in the past. Alabama struggles with teams like that sometimes. So it sets up well. It's kind of depends on what kind of pace is this game going to turn into. So we know Alabama wants to speed it up. We know Clemson wants to slow it down. Who's going to kind of take control and start using their tempo more? But Brownell's also said a lot. We're not afraid to go fast and play basketball. It's not like we're scared to play Alabama's style of basketball. We just want to do it efficiently and still run our inside out game on offense. And, if that means we have to grab some misses and try to get in transition like Alabama does, then so be it. But I don't think they want it to turn too much into a track meet. If every now and then the game speeds up a little bit, I think they're okay with that. But you don't want to start playing Alabama's game because you're usually not going to win that. So I think if they can do what they did last time, which was, you're going to need PJ Hall to have a big night offensively, which he really hasn't recently. It's been a lot of Chase Hunter, a lot of Joseph Girard. Ian Shefflin's been really good too. But if they can play the inside out game on offense and kind of try to slow Alabama down on offense a little bit, both pace and knocking down 3-pointers, I think they can stay in this game late. And as well as anyone in March, when it gets down to it and it's a tie game with 5 minutes, anybody can win it. So it's about staying in the game. They got to play their tempo and try to avoid Alabama turning it to a track meet, I think.
All right, so this from the Alabama perspective, Nato. It's scheduling very, very difficult, and really the Alabama players and program has credited that difficult schedule and credited the SEC as well, but morally the non-conference schedule for preparing them for this run and preparing them pretty much each year in the Nato era. I want to get your perspective on the ACC narrative because, Alabama beats North Carolina in the Elite Eight, and that's a historic win, and you don't want to take anything away from that. But there is the narrative that the ACC is down. But now you're seeing tournament results. Oh, SEC is the best conference in America. They go 3-8 in the first round.
Right.
3-5 in the first round. And now they've only got 2 teams left. And the Big East only got 3 teams in, but all 3 teams made it to the Sweet 16. What's your feel on, has the ACC season really prepared Clemson for, okay, you beat Alabama in November, but now it's going to be a huge stage against a good program. Has the ACC season prepared Clemson for what it's going to be tonight?
The players yesterday, and really all week, all tournament, have kind of said, yes, it has. And they I think they've always kind of felt that there was a little bit of a disrespect to the conference this year because Brownell talks about this a ton, and he kind of went in on the Big 12 a little bit before the Baylor game, and people thought it was going to end up costing him. But he's kind of saying, when you talk about quad 1 and quad 2 and all this stuff, how can you really put a number on that when there's so many teams in the ACC? There's this big giant chunk of teams that are in that like 80, 90 range. And so you're calling, NC State, for example, like a home game against NC State at the time was a bad loss, right? And now you're looking at NC State and they're going on to the Elite Eight. They just beat Marquette last night. So the NCAA tournament is just a weird thing. And I think it kind of goes both ways where I can go anti-ACC and say, okay, I don't think the NCAA tournament is the end-all be-all either. I mean, we saw an entire season of results. I don't think we can also say, okay, people saying the ACC was bad are wrong because look at the tournament. I mean, they almost had 4 of the 8 remaining. If North Carolina had beaten Alabama, they would have had half the teams in the Elite Eight. But at the same time, I don't think you can say they shouldn't deserve more teams in because, like I said, you're seeing there's 3 of 8 teams left. So I think it goes both ways. I think the Big 12 is a great conference. I think the SEC is a great conference. I think just because Auburn and some of these other teams lost early in the tournament doesn't take away the fact that, okay, they were great all season. It's just that's what happened on one day, and they lost to Yale, and so all these upsets happen, and it looks like it's just college basketball is hard, really, really, really hard to put a finger on because it's such a tournament-oriented sport, and so you can't really call things fluky, or you can't really say one thing matters and the other doesn't because a whole season's worth of games in one, it's one and done in the NCAA tournament. So it's a wild sport, and you got to be playing the right basketball at the right time, and neither of these schools really were. And now a couple weeks into the tournament, you refresh. And so I've got to put a lot of thought into recently the idea of conference tournaments. And is there any validity to people saying that maybe some teams and coaches don't really put that much into them because, hey, if we just get knocked out of the tournament, we get a little bit of extra rest and time for the tournament that really matters, right? And so I'm not saying that Oates and Brownell both did that, losing in their first game of their conference tournaments, but is there anything to that? I mean, you see Auburn go on a run, win the SEC tournament in Nashville, are they worn out by the time they play their first round game in the NCAA tournament? So I don't know. I think it's really interesting, and I think these two teams they obviously benefited from the rest. Both teams have been banged up throughout the year, and both teams are playing the right basketball at the right time, like I said. So I think the ACC and the SEC are both good conferences, and the last thing on that, I also hate the argument that sometimes that Clemson and the ACC has used that, hey, look, remember in that ACC SEC challenge, we won more games than the SEC did, so therefore we're a better conference. That has nothing to do with the level of the conferences. That has only to do with the matchups that were on hand. And obviously Alabama lost to Clemson, and the ACC took that challenge. But I don't think that makes the conference any better than the SEC. And I would argue that the SEC probably is the better conference, even though we're seeing these results.
So a lot of our listeners here on the Joe Gaither Show and viewers have been watching Alabama all year long. And so they remember that November game, and they know where Alabama's really gone from there to get to here in March. A lot of growth, hurdles, ups and downs, but growth as the theme. We watched P.J. Hall tune up Alabama for 21 points. Tell us how Clemson has improved. What's the okay, you're going to see more of this here in this March game than you did in November. Is it as simple as Shefflin being more involved in the offense? He only had 9 points here in Alabama, here in Tuscaloosa, 0 of 1 from behind the arc, and he's been a really good shooter. What's going to be the biggest difference or growth point from Clemson from that game in November?
I think the key to every game they've played the last few weeks, and including tonight, and if they win tonight going into Phoenix next week, it's always going to come down to Chase Hunter. And, you hear all the stuff about guard play in the tournament and how important it is. And you know what you're going to get from P.J. Hall most nights. He's going to be there. He needs to stay out of foul trouble. That's been a big thing. But you kind of know what you're going to get. And Chase Hunter has kind of been a wild card for them this year. He's a very veteran guard that's been there for a while, but he is the point guard. A lot of people think it's Joseph Girard. It's not. Chase Hunter's the one that's going to be pounding the ball on the floor. He kind of makes everything go. And when he plays well, Clemson plays well. When he doesn't, they don't. And so when you have that, it's kind of like a Latrell Wrightsell, which on the surface, you look at it and you're like, okay, he's not the best player on the team. But there's guys on basketball teams that when they play well, it seems like everything else around them goes better always. And so that's Chase Hunter for Clemson. When he shoots 0 for 10 in the ACC tournament against Boston College, they lose by 20 plus to a team that they should have beaten. Now he's been the best player for Clemson in the NCAA tournament, and they're in the Elite Eight for the second time in program history. So I think that there's going to be obviously a lot of attention on P.J. Hall because Nate Oates saw the film, and I'm sure they've gone back and watched it, and that was the guy that killed them in November. And look, he could kill them again because we've seen Alabama kind of struggle with really good veteran post players throughout the season. And so if Grant Nelson and the guys down there can't defend him well like they didn't in November, then that's going to be your issue. But I think there's going to be a lot of attention going there. And I think when they pass it down low to him, you're going to probably see a lot of double teams to make him give the ball up. And I think that Alabama's going to make sure that he doesn't beat them. But Chase Hunter's the guy you want to keep your eye on all night because when he plays well, things seem to go really, really good for Clemson. So maybe tonight he continues it. If he doesn't play well, I don't know. I don't really see a way Clemson wins this game if he's not one of the best players on the court.
We're hanging out with Austin Hannon, writer for Clemson247. We appreciate him hanging out with us, previewing tonight's Elite Eight matchup. You guys follow him already at Austin Hannon _. And if you don't, get on that. Austin, just a couple more minutes with you. We know I live in the echo chamber here in Alabama, what it will mean for the Crimson Tide to win tonight. Oh my gosh, the state will fall apart. The state will lose its mind, and I will be at the forefront of that. What will it mean for Clemson, though? I mean, because this feels out of the blue to me, and maybe that's out of touch. And if so, please correct me. But it feels out of the blue. It's not a traditional ACC power. It's not Wake Forest. It's not one of the traditional North Carolina schools. What does this mean to Clemson if they get this win tonight?
I think these two programs are in two different spots, Joe. I think the success that Alabama's had since Nate Oates got to town. That they've won SEC championships. They've gotten there. They were the number 1 overall seed in the tournament last year. I mean, that in itself is an accomplishment. So Alabama basketball is becoming a huge thing. I mean, everybody knows about it. They've won SEC titles. They've just been trying to get over that Sweet 16 hump, which they've done. And obviously, adding a Final Four to your resume is a huge deal. I think it's funny. We've actually got some Auburn people on our message board right now kind of saying, please beat Alabama. Please beat Alabama. We have the Final Four thing, and they don't have it yet. And that's kind of the only thing we're holding against them still, really, as an entire athletic department, is that Final Four that Auburn has and Alabama doesn't. So it's that close. So I think Alabama.
Tigers unite.
Right. And that's an exact comment, actually, I believe in the thing was, like Tigers got to stand by Tigers. But yeah, this is kind of more of a stepping stone, I think, for Alabama, whereas they're trying to get to that next step where, okay, we've done it on an SEC level. We've gotten to the Sweet 16. Now we've gotten to the Elite Eight. Can we take that next step? Can we do what last year's team couldn't do? And if you're Clemson, I think this is more of I think they're behind Alabama in terms of a program right now. I think that this run is doing a lot for the brand. I think this run's doing a lot for head coach Brad Brownell, who weeks ago, fans in the board were asking for him to be fired. I mean, this is a guy that's been at Clemson for 14 years. I believe this is just his fourth NCAA tournament appearance and only second time past the first weekend. So there's been a lot of mediocrity in town, and I think that this run has been really important for him in this program. And, you make a Final Four, it's an immediate recruiting tactic moving forward. Look, this is what we have the capability of doing. You've heard of Dabo Swinney. You know all this stuff. This is a football school. But, hey, look, when we have a good basketball team, this is what we're capable of. And so I think that's kind of the mindset of Clemson right now, whereas they're kind of playing with free money right now, where I think Alabama's got a little bit more pressure in this game just because of what I've mentioned. They've got a rival in Tennessee that's playing for a chance at a Final Four. Auburn's been to a Final Four. And in the entire program's history, which is a really good history at Alabama, believe it or not, the second most winning program in the SEC behind Kentucky, which everybody knows about Kentucky basketball. This is a winning program, but they haven't been able to get to this point really ever. And so I think this is a really big opportunity for Alabama. And I think for Clemson, it's an opportunity to kind of start moving the program forward to where Alabama's gotten theirs. So I think more pressure's on Alabama, and I think that favors Clemson. But once again, I think also the Alabama team kind of knows the gravity of this moment and what they're capable of doing. And if they win tonight, then they kind of go in Alabama lore forever for being the first team to ever make the Final Four. So really awesome matchup. I think it's really cool in the NCAA tournament to see teams and programs that haven't been there before. You're going to get the Dukes, you're going to get the Carolinas and the Villanovas, but when Alabama and Clemson are playing for a chance at a Final Four, I think it's really all that more special.
It's going to be a lot of fun tonight, and you can follow our coverage at BamaCentral.com, and you can follow Austin's coverage at Clemson247. Make sure you're getting both perspectives tonight, as it's going to be a heck of a battle out there in Los Angeles. Alabama, a 3.5-point favorite. Austin, I don't want to make you pick the game because you got you big J journalist, and you kind of we want to stay as objective as we can, but we think it's going to be a good game and going to be a lot of fun. One thought on Clemson football, since we have you here in spring ball. We've missed you. We love you so much. How has Clemson been doing? How they've been treating you? And what's the football like? I mean, they're going to get the playoff. Everything going to turn back around. Dabo kind of got some momentum down the end of the year. What's been your perspective over the last couple of months up there in Clemson?
Yeah, it's a huge season, and so I'm really excited for this fall just because a lot of different reasons. And I've heard so much about Clemson football and the environment and everything about the brand, and it's a little bit different from Alabama, obviously, and I should say it's a lot bit different from the Nick Saban regime at Alabama. I know things have definitely switched up a little bit around there. But I think it's a huge season because you've kind of hit this point, I think, with the program with Dabo. You lose 4 games. You haven't been kind of, I wouldn't say not relevant, but in that conversation for a national title since Trevor Lawrence left. And so you're kind of in this position now with the sport changing, and obviously, for better or for worse, Dabo doesn't want to use the portal. He likes it to do it his way. He wants to recruit his players, do things the old school way. And so he's been able to kind of hold up that end of the bargain for a while and say, just trust me. I've won national championships. I know what I'm doing. I can get this thing turned around. But that time cooker's kind of getting there with the fact that, okay, if you're going to say you're going to do things your way, you can't keep losing 4 games a season. Like, you're going to have to start bringing things back the way we know they can be. And so it's a huge season. I think it all kind of comes down to, what they're going to be defensively. I mean, Clemson's been great on defense for years. They've got the players still there. They've got the talent. It's offensively. Can Cade Klubnik take that next step? Can he become the 5-star quarterback that they recruited? And if he can, I think with the expanded playoff and, the ACC is not as good at football as other conferences. You lose a game to Georgia to open the season. It doesn't really, it doesn't really mess up your season. So I think it's a big year. I think I've kind of joked with people on our site too that, look, since I got here, Clemson baseball's number 3 in the country. The basketball program's in the Elite 8. I don't know. I mean, just wait till the fall, and maybe the football team kind of makes that triumphant comeback and get back to that, the national powerhouse that they were a couple years ago. But it's going to be a great football season. Spring football has been great. I'm kind of in a tough pickle here because if Clemson wins tonight, they're in the Final Four next weekend, but the spring game is also next weekend. So I think it's going to be kind of difficult for people to decide what their coverage is going to be like next weekend. But the spring game should be a lot of excitement next weekend and get to go into Death Valley for the first time, sit in the press box for the first time. That'll be a lot of fun. So football season's right around the corner, as better as anyone. I'm a big football guy and I can't wait. So, hey, and look, we might be talking Clemson, Alabama college football playoff first round game in December. So it's going to be very exciting. And I think it's weird because watching Alabama this season, no Nick Saban, I don't know. It's weird. So let's focus on the game tonight. Let's get this thing over with. Let's see who wins on the basketball court tonight. I'll give you a pick. You know what? I really do think Alabama's going to win the game. I think that at some point that luck of teams shooting 18% from 3 is going to kind of wear off for Clemson. I mean, I just don't see the way Alabama's been playing these last couple games. I don't see them not being able to knock shots down. And I just think they might be a little bit too much of a handful offensively for Clemson. And I think that might kind of be the dividend at the end of the game is that Alabama kind of scored a little bit too much. And Clemson couldn't really keep up enough down the stretch. And Alabama goes their first Final Four ever.
Well, you just sent shivers down the spine of everybody who's watching or listening on the show today, so I appreciate that. You take care of Peter Woods and was it Chris Fazzino, yes, the Birmingham quarterback?
Right.
Take care of those guys for us. Cover Clemson very well. We miss you very much. Have a great rest of your day. And guys, make sure you follow Austin Hannon, please, at Austin Hannon _ and read his Clemson coverage. There's a high chance, honestly, that the football teams meet again very, very soon. So you want to keep Clemson247 on one of your go-to tabs. I appreciate you, Austin.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes, sir. Have a great day. And look, I love catching up with friends, and I really appreciate Austin joining me a lot. I miss that guy a lot. He does great work, and is very, very helpful for me getting started. So, look, tonight, Alabama basketball, 740, 750, somewhere right in that range. It's a huge one. I like Austin's pick. I do think Alabama's going to win. I have felt like Clemson's success all season long has been a bit flukish in nature. And I don't like really saying that because obviously those guys are working very hard and they have a game plan and they've been executing it, obviously 20 to 24 wins, and one of them coming here in Tuscaloosa. But I don't think they're going to shoot 50% from behind the arc like they did here in Tuscaloosa. What was it exactly? It was, I got my tab right there, 52%, 11 of 21 from behind the arc. You had 4 of 7 from Joseph Girard. You had your man Chase Hunter went 3 of 5, just like Austin was saying, and PJ Hall hit 3 as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun tonight. You'll be able to follow our friends Blake Byler and Katie Wyndham are out there in Los Angeles. Follow them at Blake Byler 45 and Katie Wyndham _ and follow Bama Central at Bama Central on X, at Alabama Crimson Tide on Sports Illustrated on Facebook, and anywhere that you can get right there at BamaCentral.com. You can find me at Joe Gaither 6. Send me your comment, question, query, and complaint. We had a lot of fun this week catching up with a handful of different people. We caught up with Blake Byler on Tuesday. We caught up with Luke Metz yesterday afternoon. And we caught up with Austin Hannon today to talk about the Clemson game. If you missed any of those episodes, they're right there on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon, or as well right there on the Bama Central YouTube channel at Bama Central. I'm going to get out of here for the day. I'm going to go see if I can make it to tip-off with all my fingernails still intact. And we'll be back to cover it, win or lose, right here on the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central and BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither 6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.